The first time I had to fire an employee, that was scary. The first time I had to take somebody to the hospital because they fell off a roof, that was really scary, right? You go through all these scary moments and you're just so nervous. But eventually, after a while, it just kind of becomes natural, kind of like driving a car for the first time on the freeway. It's like really scary at first, but then after a while, it's just second nature. For hundreds of years, people couldn't run a 4-minute mile. And in 1954 or something like that, Roger Bannister is the first person to run that 4-minute mile. And for decades before that, all these experts have came out and said, you know what? Nobody can run a 4-minute mile. It's physically impossible, right? Our bodies aren't made for it. The wind factor and how our bodies have developed, it's not possible. No way, no how. And this is what was touted as science for a long time. And then here comes Roger Bannister. He goes out there, runs a 4-minute mile, blows everybody away. And that same year, 24 other people do the same thing. They run the 4-minute mile. And the concept behind that is that obviously nothing changed, right? The diet didn't change. The technology of the footwear didn't change. The running technique didn't change. The only thing that changed was that one person went out there and did it. And because people saw it was possible, it gave them the confidence to go out there and do it themselves.
Be sure to check out all the tools and tips for aspiring entrepreneurs at findyourfreedompod.com. Welcome to Find Your Freedom, the best entrepreneurship podcast. Today, we welcome Johnny Rhee. Thanks so much for coming on today with us today.
Absolutely. It's an honor to be here.
Johnny, welcome to Find Your Freedom, my man. We go way, way, way back, about 20 years ago, 2 decades in the making, this relationship. We worked together at for those of the audience that don't know, College Works Painting, one of the greatest college internship opportunities out there for young college students to run their own business. So I owe you this huge debt of gratitude for helping me through that perilous journey and all the difficulties and challenges that I faced going through the program as intern, branch operator, working under you, the VP, the Jedi Master. And when I think back, I have this vision of you up on stage and just having this commanding presence and, telling all these college students what they're going to gain from the program, how to be successful. And that has stayed with me all these years. So first, let me just start by saying thank you so much for the huge, huge impact that you've had on my life. And we're excited for the impact you're about to have on all the audience that's listening to this episode today. So before we dive into your fascinating past, can you just tell us quickly, catch us up? What are you doing today? What does your business Nextdoor Home Solutions do and provide? And what has set you guys apart in your industry?
Absolutely. Before that, thanks for having me on, Doug. And obviously, we go way back. And I do remember when I first hired you. I think this was 2004. Is that the year you started, 2004?
It was either 03 or 04.
I think
so
it was 04,
close,
somewhere around then. I just remember Doug and just his sense of optimism that was really infectious. So you just always had a huge smile. And even when you became a DM, I just remember you had just this sense of inspiration that everybody just wanted to be around you. And, you remember Rich Headley and you mentored him. And I speak with Rich. I see him every twice a year, and I probably speak with him every month. And he still talks about some of the impacts you made on him. So I really appreciate I appreciate you having me on, and thanks so much for those kind words. So today, I split my time in just a few different areas in entrepreneurial endeavors. I think about 10% of my time is spent on Johnny Rhee Consulting, which really is a focus on business consulting and startup consulting. About 20% of my time, I'm really focused on real estate, which includes like flipping land, doing value adds to acquisitions. And I do run a small portfolio of short-term rentals and long-term rentals. And then I think another 5 to 10% of my time, I'm really focused on new business ventures, nonprofits, and investing in new businesses. But I would say the majority of my time, where the bread and butter of what I do, what my day job, I would say is running Nextdoor Home Upgrades.
And what can you expand?
And Nextdoor Home Upgrades is mainly a solar company, but tell us a little bit about what the company does and how you've successfully grown it to what it is today.
We do energy efficient improvements for homes and businesses. 70% of our revenue is related to solar. And I would say about 30% is everything else from cool roofs, HVAC, installations, windows, turf. And, we like, even though we did 8 figures in revenue last year, we're still considered a really small business in the solar world. So, and I think as a small business, doing like 30 to 40 projects a month, I think we are able to provide really unmatched personalized service. And as evidence, almost 70% of our business last year came from referrals. And this year we're trending closer to 80%. And this is in an industry where the average referral revenue is probably less than 20%. Solar is one of those things you put on a house and then you just kind of forget about it. So we're very highly referral based. We have a lot of repeat customers that continue to come back to us, and a lot of people that are continuing to refer other customers. And I think a big part of what makes our model like this and sustainable is that we really try to sell solar holistically. Like, we look at the house as, if this were my house, how would I want to approach it? For example, if someone has like a really old, inefficient AC that's just an energy monster that's about to give out, well, I'd rather replace it and give someone a solar system that's smaller than to just overbuild a really large solar system. Yeah, of course, I'll make more money if I put on the biggest solar system possible. But I really like to look at, okay, well, what can we do to really manage this customer's home efficiency as a whole, not just looking at their energy consumption. So I think because of that, customers really trust us. And not only that, we get a lot of repeat business. What we'll do is we'll put solar on, 1 year, and maybe we'll do the HVAC. Well, in 2 or 3 years, we'll do their windows. So we've had a lot of customers where literally every couple of years, they're doing some kind of business with us after their solar, which has been really incredible.
The repeat business portion of that, I think, is just so powerful, because when you're running a business where you have people referring like, oh, this guy did a good job. And like we're talking about getting pool quotes right now. And it's like, we have 3 of our friends that all got pools with the same guy, and they all recommended him. And it's like, oh, well, this is probably the guy we should go with, because he's done jobs for our friends and he was trustworthy and did a good job. So the fact that your business is running at an 80% clip, I think that's probably one of the highest ones I've ever heard of for the year. Good on you guys. That's awesome.
Yeah. You must be doing something right.
And you had referenced earlier you're being the California director for CollegeWorks Painting. Can you go through back in that period of your life? What was it? Or maybe we should start here. How many people were you in charge of? Were you in charge of that region? And was it mostly just college age?
Yeah, so it was mostly college kids, right, that were running those branches like Doug. And then there was district managers that were also college kids that were managing small teams. But then we had a bunch of employees that were seasonal for the summertime. And, at any given point in the summertime, we probably had, 500 or 600 people working underneath, my business structure at that time.
All right. So 500 people per year. So how many years did you do that? How many college kids' lives did you impact or see get developed in your program?
Man, I was a VP running the California CollegeWorks business for 5 years. So it's probably a few hundred.
So thousands. We're talking hundreds and thousands. I love that.
Yeah,
that's awesome.
It's probably important to also let the audience know that Johnny himself started as just an 18-year-old intern. You want to tell us about 18-year-old Johnny Rhee and, what you were like when you first came to UCLA and started the internship program?
Yeah. I think I was I think a big part of me was I was really introverted. I still am introverted, but I was introverted. I was a college, computer science major. And I think a big part of like that first year, what happened for me with CollegeWorks was that it really, we were talking about comfort zones right before we started this call, and it really like got me to push past my comfort zones, right? And here I was, I'd only worked like one real job before, which was Jamba Juice. But here I was like hiring and employing 10 people all of a sudden, right? And a lot of times when you do something for the first time, it's really scary, right? Like the first time I had to ask for $1,000 deposit check, that was scary. The first time I had to fire an employee, that was scary. The first time I had to take somebody to the hospital because they fell off a roof, that was really scary, right? You go through all these scary moments and you're just so nervous. But eventually after a while, it just kind of becomes natural, kind of like driving a car for the first time on the freeway. It's like really scary at first, but then after a while, it's just second nature. So I think when I came into this program, I didn't really, to College Works, I didn't really know much about anything. But what I did learn, and I think the biggest takeaway from that year was just this thrill of trying something new, attempting to like master it, make it your own. And I just grew in love with that idea of like, hey, I just want to grow every year. I just want to get out my comfort zones every year. And it's this idea that you're either moving forward or you're slipping backwards. You're either increasing your skill sets or knowledge, or you're letting those skills and knowledge deteriorate. And I think I really got lucky when I went through that program, because I got hooked early on that adrenaline rush of trying to do something new and pushing myself outside of that comfort zone.
I think that's huge. Yeah, I think I'm super curious as to you going through that personally, and then watching those hundreds of other students going through that process. What do you think are the most critical skills that those, I don't even know if they knew that they were really jumping into entrepreneurship, if they had that real awareness, but what are the really important critical skills that you feel you gained and you watched those hundreds of students gain as early entrepreneurs?
Well, I think this is just, I think a lot of your listeners are young. They're either in college or they're maybe just out of college. And I would say that in general, there's two things that really stand out to me as kind of the keys of what people should be focused on when they're young. And number one is time management. And the other one is having this ownership mentality. And I think really how effectively you own and manage your day is paramount. Of course, you need to work really hard that's just part of it. You have to work hard to be successful, but working hard, digging ditches like 80 hours a week isn't going to make you successful. It's not going to get to where you want to go. If you're running around being disorganized and wasting time, you aren't going to be successful either. Right. One of my favorite John Wooden quotes is never mistake activity for achievement. And let's put it this way. I think the number one deficit that prevents someone from being successful is the lack of discipline to manage and prioritize their time effectively. And when I look at my UCLA college career, I mean, I got great grades in college as a business economics major, right? And I did a minor in accounting and computer science. So there was, I was in that very heavy schoolwork. It was a tough curriculum. And all while I was working two challenging jobs, really full time for the most part, all throughout colleges. And so by the time I graduated, I'd really developed all of these really crucial real world skills and character traits, which is what gave me the confidence to later on, buy that College Works franchise in California. And also financially, I think a lot of young people these days that go to college, they're just coming out with so much debt. And financially for me, I took out loans my freshman year in college. But after that, I paid my way through school because I was working full time. And by the time I had also graduated, I had saved up like $40,000, which allowed me to buy my first property right after I graduated from school. And 5 years later, that was 2007. I sold that property for a $300,000 gain, and I only had $40,000 in the deal. So that just gave me such a leg up. So, and I think people always ask me, well, Johnny, you must have had no life in college, right? That just sounds too crazy. And I said, well, yeah, I was really busy, but because I had these time management skills that I developed, I still had a really healthy social life, right? I was a huge UCLA basketball fan, football fan. So I went to a lot of the games. I tell people I gave up three things in college. Number one was sleeping in. I never slept in past 8 o'clock. I mean, I was always up early, and most college kids, if they don't have class, they're not getting up until 10 or 11. Number two was watching TV or playing video games. I just didn't watch TV. I don't know anything about what happened on TV during my college years. The only thing I watched on TV was UCLA sports. So I didn't watch any TV or play video games. Number three thing that I gave up was just getting so blasted at a party that I couldn't wake up the next day and get to what I needed to do.
Yeah, that's a big impact.
I gave up those three. Yeah, I gave up those three things while I was in college, but I was still able to get good grades, develop all these skills, work these jobs, financially do well for myself. And really the trade-off is it wasn't much. Sleeping in, watching video games, or watching TV and playing video games. It's not. I take that trade all day long. All day long and twice on Sunday, right?
Right.
So I think if you can learn how to manage your time in a productive way, I think that's the number one kind of thing right off the bat for a young person.
I really love the way you broke that down, Johnny, because it's like, I think a lot of people, especially when you're 18, 19, 20 years old, you get to college, you're like, oh man, there's just so much coming at you and there's so much fun stuff to do. And you're just like, there's not enough time in the day. I got to make all these parties. I got to, and then after the party, you got to sleep in, and the video games, going into the other guy's dorm room, play video games and stuff. There's all those stuff that's eating away at your time. And if you don't like sit down and identify, like, what are the things that I'm going to cut out in order to make time for the things that are important and going to set me up. If you don't do that, you just lose a ton of time. And so I think I'm glad that you brought that up, because I think, people taking the time to do that is really going to make a huge impact in finding that time in each of their weeks to put towards the things that will make them successful.
Yeah, absolutely. And the point I typically make to a young person is that they say that the average American spends 25 hours a week currently watching content, playing video games, or on social media. And the point I always make is like, look, assuming that you're awake 100 hours a week, that is 25% of your life.
Right.
That means if you live 80 years, that translates to 20 years of waking life. Like when you're awake, 20 years of your life went to things that really don't matter. And what can you get done in 20 years? So much. And a lot of your listeners are in their, they're probably 19, 20 years. That's like your whole life. Right. So and not to say that like you can't watch content or play video or relax. I'm not saying that you got to cut them out completely. But what I am saying is that you have to really take a realistic look at your life and how you spend your time and ask yourself, what am I doing that's preventing me from being successful? How much time is going to places that aren't benefiting me or my future, and make changes accordingly. And a lot of that requires thought and planning. That's a huge part. I think like if you can figure out the time management piece when you're young and learn how to be very productive with your day, then that will take you a long way.
Yeah, I think one of the nuggets that you kind of slipped in there that I think is so valuable is just being aware and conscious of the fact of the trade-off that you're making when you're younger. I think you and I kind of had a similar track, Johnny, where we both started working pretty early in developing our skill set and kind of consciously sacrificing some of the social aspects of college. We still, like you, I still think I had a really nice college experience, but a lot of my friends mostly partied and didn't work very much. And then they got out of college and they're like, all right, now how am I going to start this thing? Whereas I already had 3 years of a full-time job where I'd been developing marketing and sales and customer service skills. And I was already getting lots of opportunities straight out of college. It sounds like you had a huge number of opportunities from the skills that you had learned in college works and as you worked your way up through that company. So I think that it's important for that nugget to be really transparent for the audience to hear is be aware of what the trade-offs are and where you're going to be when you graduate college or, a few years down the line. If you don't think, all right, do I need to find a better balance here? And like Johnny Rhee said, recognizing that there is time management and you can do all the things, you just have to figure out which ones, how they should be weighted. So I think that was super, super critical.
Absolutely. And I think going along with that, I think it's also like there's a time for balance in life, right? I think, when do you truly need balance in life? Like people always talk, I just want to have this balanced life. And my point I always make is that there's a time for balance. When do you really need balance is when you have kids and families, right? That's when you really need balance. But, like 18 to 25, you don't need balance. That is the time to like buckle down and get to work and develop yourself, right? That is the time, right? You have no real responsibilities. You don't have to make sure that kids are taken care of or have to provide for them. You have, right, this just unique opportunity when you're young to develop these skill sets. So I always tell people that it's okay to be a little bit unbalanced. I want you to have fun between 18 and 25, don't get me wrong, but it's okay to be a little bit unbalanced toward professional development when you are young, because if you do that, you're not going to be working like crazy and being miserable for the rest of your life. You either work really hard from 18 to 30, or you're going to be working hard from 30 to 65. Which one do you want? And that's the trade-off for sure.
Yeah, Johnny, you're saying exactly kind of what, when people ask me like, oh, Jonathan, how'd you get yourself in that position? And how'd you get to be there in your 30s? What you're saying is exactly kind of what I regurgitate back to the people is that those choices that I made early on set me up to be here. And I think, when people talk now and when people ask me about becoming an entrepreneur, in their 30s and in their 40s, what you just said resonates really powerfully, because it is harder to do in your 30s and 40s. You have more responsibilities.
It is.
You don't have as much energy. There's so many other things going on in life later on. So what you said, I think I just want to make sure the audience hears is in your, late teens and in your early 20s, that is your like best window, in my opinion, to kind of just blow it all out. And, you get to sleep less. Like almost all the people in college that I know, there was lots of times where you did not get very much sleep and you still thrived. And now going into your 30s and 40s, it's not as much that case. Most of my friends and people that I talk to and people we have on the podcast, they're like, oh yeah, I need 7 or 8 hours of sleep or else I'm not, at my best. So like, it's really important that what you just said is that's a really good window, both physiologically, just like go do your best in that period. A lot of people kind of spend that energy partying and socializing and getting, what would be considered like the real maximum college experience. But you have to understand what you're giving up. And I have a few friends that are just graduating college, some mentees that are graduating college and just starting out. And they're kind of regretting that they didn't find a little bit better balance and didn't use time management a little better. So I think that's a really powerful recommendation you had there.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, Johnny, I don't know if I ever shared with you, but part of my motivation for wanting to do College Works in the first place was watching this guy grind right here. So, he's 1 year older than me. And like he said, through college, he has these full-time jobs. And I'm doing jobs kind of like your Jamba Juice. I worked at Blockbuster and having jobs that I knew weren't really going to do much for me long term.
Blockbuster.
I did Blockbuster.
You're really showing your age there now, Doug.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I love throwing that in. People are like listening, like, what's Blockbuster? So anyways, Jonathan really, really motivated me because he would say, all right, dude, you're having a great college experience, but what are you going to do afterwards? And that question was always, rattling in my head. And then Justin Rhees, our mutual friend, came into my classroom and told me about this internship. And, fast forward, 20 years later, I look back on it as like the moment everything kind of changed for me professionally and set me up in my career. So going back to either College Works or just kind of early on in your entrepreneurial history, what do you look back on as kind of that really painful moment that you had to overcome when you're like, wow, this entrepreneurship stuff is hard. And man, this is like really a test of strength. Do you have any moments that you can think back on from, 20 years ago when you first started College Works painting or when you were starting to move up in the ranks at College Works?
Well, like when I used to interview college kids, I would always ask them, well, what is your biggest failure? And a lot of them would say, they would have this really benign and pitiful answer, like I didn't do well on a test or I didn't make varsity basketball or something silly. And my response was always like, well, it just sounds like you haven't tried anything very difficult then.
Wow.
Because, when you're asking me about, well, are there moments where there was really painful? You had to no, of course, part of success is failing really big. It's this concept that you have to fail up to be successful. And if you think about all the failed businesses or endeavors that I've been a part of, or I've started like Cyber Campus 2000, House Roamer, the wine subscription business, big losers in real estate deals. The list goes on. I've lost so much money on deals that, 6-figure losses. There's a lot of pain in those experiences. And so it's really hard to, when you say, can you think of one? I can think of so many. So it's really hard to even, yeah. But I think that's when you stretch and learn the most as an entrepreneur. And it's definitely entrepreneurship is a bumpy ride with huge highs and lows. And it requires a lot of patience just to weather the storm. And you have to be okay with those highs and lows.
So, going back to College Works, did you have a moment while you were there where you had the confidence, that breakthrough moment?
Yeah. Did you feel like you were making it when you bought the District of California from College Works like that? Those all seem like really early successes. Did you think like, wow, I'm making it?
Yeah, absolutely. I felt like I'd made it big, obviously, in my mind. I just had turned 22 when I made this deal.
Wow.
So yeah, it was a big deal. And as Doug knows, we were able to grow that business. By the time I sold that business, we had actually tripled the revenue. So we'd
Wow.
really grown that business a ton. So yeah, I had a lot of confidence in that I know that I can grow that specific business, right? And that's a very specific business, a unique business, right? It's not really it's really in the development of college students. That's the business that I was in, is developing people,
Right.
right, in the construction field, specifically painting. So it was a unique field. I just didn't know if I could replicate that outside of this very small arena of things.
Right.
So, yeah, I don't know if there was a specific moment, but what I think, the moment where I started realizing, no, I can do this and run a business was I started, after I sold that business, I was working with the parent company, National Services Group, for a while, but I also started my own, consulting business where I was working with different small businesses from all sorts of different industries, from, lighting to luxury travel. And I was trying to help them grow their businesses, and I just saw them kind of like evolve, and I would help them, and I could see them succeeding, and it just I had too many examples of like people succeeding around me. I had a lot of Roger Bannisters, so to speak. You guys know who Roger Bannister is?
Yeah. Give the audience a quick background, though.
Yeah.
Yeah. So Roger Bannister, right? The story is that, for hundreds of years, people couldn't run a 4-minute mile. And in 1950, I think in 1954 or something like that, Roger Bannister is the first person to run that 4-minute mile. And for decades before that, all these experts have came out and said, you know what? Nobody can run a 4-minute mile. It's physically impossible, right? Our bodies aren't made for it. The wind factor and how our bodies have developed, it's not possible. No way, no how. And this is what was touted as science for a long time. And then here comes Roger Bannister. He goes out there, runs a 4-minute mile, blows everybody away. And that same year, 24 other people do the same thing. They run the 4-minute mile. And the concept behind that is that obviously nothing changed, right? The diet didn't change. The technology of the footwear didn't change. The running technique didn't change. The only thing that changed was that one person went out there and did it. And because people saw it was possible, it gave them the confidence to go out there and do it themselves. So here I am. I'm just, I'm helping different businesses, and a big part of like my job and what I was really focused on was systemization. And that's something that I'm like a really big proponent of, developing these SOPs in these businesses, because I think that's what helps small businesses go from really small businesses to medium-sized businesses, is having really good SOPs, standards of procedures. And if you develop those systems, then you can replicate that, right? And that's pretty much a pretty well-known business kind of strategy. And that's what I was doing. I was developing SOPs. So I just watched these people grow their like small businesses into bigger businesses, and helping them do that just gave me the confidence to want to go out there and try it on my own.
That's so awesome.
So when you're working with new companies, do you feel that a lot of companies struggle because they struggle to get off the ground, struggle to get over that initial hump because they're missing these SOPs, or is it something that you see getting implemented later in the cycle?
So when I'm looking at like a lot of small businesses, there's the biggest, it comes down to, like we've already talked about it, but a lot of the owners don't manage their time well. They're doing a lot of things that they're spending a lot of time in the minutia of things versus working on their business, right? So they're not developing SOPs, right? They have a bunch of people that are working for them that shouldn't be working there. They really needed to go out there and attract and hire really good talent, and they're not doing that. All right. They're not really focused on growing their business. So they're not really knee deep in the acquisition of new business, sales, and marketing. They're not doing that. Their headspace is so much into the day to day that they're missing out on that. So for me, that's always, those are one of three things. It's always time management. They're not spending the right time. They're not focused on hiring new people, and they're not focused on acquiring new business. And that's why they just kind of are stuck in their place.
That's super interesting. You had referenced a little bit ago how you've had quite a few failures, and we appreciate you being transparent with the audience about that, because I think it's important that people understand that not every entrepreneurial gig is going to be a home run. Can you talk through with us a little bit about some of the similarities of why you think which ones were successful and which ones weren't successful. Is there some lessons that you learned through that process of starting so many companies at this point that is like, here's why this one worked, here's why these didn't?
I don't know. I mean that's a tough question. Sometimes I feel like some of those businesses could have worked out. It's just maybe the timing wasn't right. We just didn't quite get the right mix. Maybe I wasn't as motivated to see that through. So there's a lot of variables there. I will say that some of those businesses were started with partners, and I think partnerships are they're a challenge.
Right.
I think they bring another complexity to starting a business that yeah, that's challenging. And I've done a lot of consulting for businesses where a lot of the issue is not even about the business, but it's about that there's two owners or three owners and they just don't get along.
Mm-hmm.
And I certainly saw there was a couple businesses that I was involved in where I felt like, you know what, if the partnership was different, we could have definitely succeeded here. But the partnership, it wasn't going to work out. It was kind of doomed to fail. So I'm always very cautious about partnerships in general. And you better really know who you're in business with.
That's super interesting.
How do you identify a good partnership, Johnny? I think that's a huge point. Jonathan and I have been huge beneficiaries of, having great partners that have helped us to get where we are. And I think, we can both confidently say we feel like, we've been just so blessed with who we were fortunate enough to get into business with. What do you look for, when you're considering going into a partnership?
I look for just a really long track record of success and also a long track record of being in a relationship with them. I don't want to ever partner with somebody I just met up. Like let's work together. Let's collaborate on some projects and let's do it over, a few years and let me really get to understand who you are. Let me get to, understand your family. Let's build a relationship over at least a few years. And then it's something that, it's like, I feel like I can trust this person. I feel like we're a good personality in terms of just like our personalities fit together, that we can work together. We're on the same cadence. I feel like we can get there. So I just think it takes time. And I think there's a lot of people that just rush into business. Oh, this guy's actually good at this and this guy's really good at this. So we're just going to partner up. And it's like, well, you're not really considering how you guys really gel as a group. You have no experience working together as a business owners together. And that's where I think there's a lot of challenges sometimes.
I love that. Yeah, it's really good advice because it really can be the fatal decision that people make and what could make a successful business not work out. I was curious if you could talk to that college Johnny, or even just look back and talk to those hundreds of college kids that you've helped develop. Is there certain advice or recommendations that you feel is just universal that they should hear in that late college period or post college period? Is there certain just like universal truths? It's just like, here's some things you need to hear that you felt really benefited the people you developed?
I think for young people, I think for me personally, if I were talking to myself, I would just say, take a risk earlier. I think, I'm a little bit conservative by nature. So I think I waited a little too long. I mean, I was consulting all these businesses, helping them be successful, and I wasn't starting my own thing.
Right.
And I should have done that probably 2 or 3 years earlier, if anything. But I would say that for young people today, one of the things that I'm just such a big proponent of is, like, I think I mentioned just taking ownership and having that ownership mentality. And like, you may be in a job that you may not particularly love, perhaps. Maybe it's not your long-term gig, and that's okay. You're going to transition to something better. But whatever task that you are given, just, approach that with a mentality that is your own business, right? And I think it's so important to learn how to be a good employee. If you're going to be an entrepreneur and have employees one day, if you yourself are never a great employee, it's really hard to manage good employees down the line.
Right.
And I don't know. I don't know if are you guys religious at all? Are you guys?
Not so much.
No, not so much.
Not too much. No.
Okay. All right. Well, yeah. I just kind of like to think that I come from a Christian background, and I love the story of Joseph, where it's this guy. He's put in all these challenging positions, right? He's sold off by his brothers to, these slave traders, but whatever task he is given, right, whatever position he's in, he gets a lot of favor from the people that manage him, because they just realize how hard he tries and how good of a job he does, no matter what he's given, no matter the situation. And I think that ownership mentality is so important. When you're doing that, people will notice. And not only that, when you're taking that ownership mentality and going above and beyond whatever task that you're given, right, you will get more opportunities and you will learn a heck of a lot more than you're learning now. And in my office, I always say the way you do anything is the way you do everything, right? I'm constantly telling that. Like whenever they do something silly, I'm like, look, I know it's small, but the way you do anything is the way you do everything. And I just find that a lot of young people, they're just going through the motion and they're not getting the most out of their employment. They have to be there. If you have to be there, if you have to go to work, why not try to do a really good job and learn the most that you can out of that position?
That's such good advice.
Funny enough, yeah, the solar business was something that, so I was given a project at work. I was doing consulting and I was given a project, and the project was, they were doing all sorts of other construction. And the project was, we want to learn about the solar business and we want to know if this is a viable business that we should get into. And I was given this project. So I spent 3 months learning about the solar business, knew nothing about it, learning about the solar business, going through all the numbers, reaching out, talking with a bunch of other people that were involved, and actually creating a business plan for this company. And they had looked at the plan and they kind of, went back and forth on it. And finally they decided, you know what? There's all these risks that we don't like about this business. We don't like the risk of regulatory risk. We don't like the fact that it's so dependent on government incentives. So they ended up just taking that, business plan and just shelving it and said, you know what, this is not the right business for it. But I had spent so much time doing I'd really treated it as if it was my own. I treated it as if I was starting this business with a ton of cash, how would I approach this? And I'd done all this research to the point where a year later, I just kind of went back and looked at that and said, you know what? I think this is something I want to try to get involved in.
That's cool.
Yeah.
That's really interesting.
Yeah. It only happened because I had, put in the time and effort to have that ownership mentality from the get-go on a project that got shelved long time ago.
That's so interesting.
So yeah. And when you're really doing that approach, if you have that ownership mentality, you just get more opportunities. Opportunities just come to you, whether somebody gives them to you or you discover them for yourself. Opportunities will fall in your lap if you have that mentality where everything I do is going to be done to the best of my abilities. And I'm going to do it really competently and I'm going to give it my all.
I totally agree with that.
That's such a beautiful illustration of the ownership mentality. When you first said it earlier, I was thinking back to, there was a young guy at the last corporate company that I worked at before I started my own business. And I remember sitting down with him one night. We worked a long night. It was 8:00 at night. And I said, dude, how did you get here? How did you, climb your way up so fast? He was only a couple of years older than me and he was one of the directors at the company. And his answer was very similar. He just said, I treat this like it's my own business. He's like, it's not my company. I'm just one of the directors that work here. But when I do work every day and I come in, I treat the business like it's my own. And that was probably 15 years ago. And that has always stuck with me. And it's good to hear how that concept, Johnny, kind of was led to you having this successful business that you're currently running today and have been running for the last decade. So we're going to transition in here into some entrepreneurship questions here for you, Johnny. I know we've been kind of, really the theme of the show and most of what we talked about is entrepreneurship, but we have a couple little rapid fire things we want to fire at you here before we get you out of here. So what would you say is either the most impactful piece of business or career advice that you've received, or who is the most impactful person that you've worked with in your long, illustrious career?
Well, I think they kind of go one and the same. I know, Doug, you and we have, last our conversation, I talked to you about an accountability group. And that's been just a huge impact. About, I think 2014 or 15, I started an accountability group with 6 men, and including myself. And we have gotten together every year, twice a year, actually. We've never missed a single retreat together. And we've gone through and we share our goals. We have a really nice template where we write in all of our goals from, family, marriage, social, work, financial, everything you can think of. And we really hold each other accountable to those goals. We really give each other advice and really push each other to greatness. And I think that's when I think about like who's really impactful, I just think about that peer group
Wow.
of just people that that we're able to rely on for advice as a sounding board. But not only that, everybody needs accountability in life. The greatest athletes, they all have coaches. And whether it's peer coaching or a mentor, you need those people to really push you if you're going to see success, right? You can't do it by yourself, right? And you certainly don't want to learn all the mistakes yourself, right? You want to be able to learn from other people's mistakes. And one thing I always tell young people all the time is seek advice from people you want to become. Surround yourself with people that want to push you towards success. So that group's, that's been really critical for me. I really believe that. So and all of them are very like-minded. We all get along. We all went through college works together at one point too. So that's that one commonality that we also
The brotherhood.
have. Yep, the brotherhood. Yep.
Yeah. I hope for everyone listening to this episode, I hope that they all find a group of people that can help develop your organization, that can help develop you. Just the amount of time I've spent with Doug over the last 20 years, the number of people in his life still that came from that College Works organization that are now doing really cool, amazing things and are really amazing people. I just am just in total awe of, I think you can take a lot of credit for that since you started it so young and really grew it into what it was, with Doug and the years after that. It's just such a cool thing to see people working together and learning these things in the trenches together. College kids all working together doing that. And I think what you just said is so important on having someone in your life, a few friends, so you can think that this person is going to really hold me accountable on what I want to do. And I think it's pretty rare to formalize that the way that you did with this group. We're going to get together once or twice a year and we're going to talk through our goals. And then that is going to come up the next year and they're going to be asking you if any of those things happened and working through, game plans for them. I think that's a really, really powerful tool to do. And I do that sporadically with some friends, not as formalized as you. But I think starting that early in your life, starting that in your 20s, having a group of people that you talk about those things with, I think that that's really, really powerful advice to really ensure that you're doing the things and taking the steps daily, weekly, monthly that are going to get you to where you want to be. Because it happens so often where people just years go by and they don't get progress. And they're just where did those years go? But if you have a group asking you that, then it's not going to happen. So I think that's super, super cool.
Yeah, and I will also say that as all of us are men, we are families, we're fathers, and I think when you get married and you start having kids, it's really hard to maintain relationship with other men, right? Your friends really become more, the people you hang out with become more like the parents of your kids' friends, right? It starts to transition that way, and it becomes more and more difficult to maintain relationship as men. And I think that's a big part of it also, is not just the business, but it's also how do we support each other as men to be good fathers and good husbands. So that's been really critical also. And that's more for advice for older listeners that, are embarking on having families and kids and things like that.
Yeah, no, that's a great piece. And I think, but both sides of it, it's so useful at this point in our lives, but it's also, think how big of an advantage that would be to start that earlier in your life, to have that group earlier in your life, building those relationships up and everything. One of the questions we ask everyone that we have on the episode is, how would you personally define entrepreneurship?
Entrepreneurship for me is providing a service that people want while providing opportunities for people to thrive and grow. And I think a lot of people think that entrepreneurship is, I think they confuse entrepreneurship and being self-employed. And I think they're really, really different. When you're an entrepreneur, you've got to make an impact on other people in a really positive way. And that's what I really loved about College Works, was that we were in the game of developing people and helping them fulfill their dreams. And just, that brings me a lot of satisfaction knowing that that we're able to do that in a business setting. I just couldn't imagine, even in the businesses that I'm a part of now, that we have employees, and I just couldn't imagine what I would do without them. I mean, they're just great people, but I also know that a lot of them feel the same way about me, where we took them when they knew very little about anything, and we've just grown them into fantastic human beings and grown them into so much success and just provided ample opportunities to grow. And to me, that's what true entrepreneurship is all about, is giving people opportunities to grow and thrive.
That's beautiful. One of the other questions we love to share with our listeners is, what is your go-to resources for learning and for development? I see a lot of books there behind you. Is that your main resource?
Yeah. So, my younger days, I used to read a lot. Obviously now you have you have a lot of electronic, you have a lot of podcasts. I mean, I'm always just shockingly surprised about how many great podcasts there are that continue to come out every day. I don't have time to listen to all of them. But yeah, I mean, the great news about today versus, 20 years ago is that there's so much access to information for somebody to be successful. Like the analogy I always give to people is that when I was in college, like, where did you get your information? If you wanted to learn how to build, a website, where could you do that? And you had to go to school. You had to learn Java. You had to go to computer, programming classes. And now today, like if you want to learn how to build a website, there's so many resources. It's so easy. A lot of them are there. You can just plug and play, and make websites quickly in like 10 minutes, right? And if you want to learn about how to do anything, you just go to YouTube. There's so much information. The access that people have to information is just so incredible to when I was a college student, where we didn't even have a smartphone, right? So
Yeah, you were in the pre-internet
I
days,
was,
I think,
I
Johnny,
was in
weren't you?
the days where you had the computer and you had to plug it in, right, with an Ethernet cord in the dorms. That's how you got access to internet,
Right.
right? So I didn't even have a cell phone until a junior in college, right? So and it was like you were limited to like whatever 100 minutes a month, and if you went over that, it just cost you an arm and a leg.
That's got to be mind-blowing for
Yeah,
people to think about now. The fact that you would have
yeah,
a
yeah.
finite number of minutes that you could talk to people on your phone. Like unlimited has been around so long now that that's like mind-blowing. That and Blockbuster are the two big defining age moments of us.
Those are the bookends.
Yep, absolutely. Yeah. So yeah, but I just tell people like, there's so many resources right now, and I think it is. People always say, "Oh, it's so hard to be successful today. It was so much easier back then." And I always counter with, "No, I don't think so. I think the access to information, the wealth of information for somebody to learn and grow and be successful, there is much less bound. There's less like walls, to entry than you think today than there was 10 years ago, 20 years ago, or even 30 years ago. So I try to have to remind them that you can't have that woe is me mentality. But yeah, I love podcasts. I love books. All of those things are mediums which I feel like are resources to learn and grow.
This was such a good podcast, Johnny, because I think your career and the people that you've developed are really involved so much of what we try and do with this podcast, just helping people see what it takes to be successful as an entrepreneur and the challenges that we all go through, that they are able to be overcome, and that we will have some failures, but those failures don't define us, and we use the knowledge to move forward. So I think you covered all of that in the pod today. So I super appreciate that. A lot of the people are going to want to be able to reach out to you. Where should we send them when they ask us?
Yeah, you can find me on LinkedIn. It's pretty easy to find me on LinkedIn. That's probably the easiest place if you want to reach out.
Cool. And then the website, what's the main company you have right now?
So the main website, nextdoorsolar.com. That's our website of what I consider my primary job.
Awesome. Well, I love it. We'll pop all those into the show notes. Thanks so much, Johnny. This was really, really an awesome episode.
Absolutely. I appreciate it. Thanks for having me on.
We appreciate you so much, my man. This has been a long time coming, and when we have people like yourself that come on, it really feels like a full circle moment. Thinking back on all those good times of going through the trenches together back in our college works days. So again, I wanted to thank you for then, and thank you for coming on the show today.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and yeah, I mean, thanks for having me, Doug. And like whenever I talk with former interns or former people that I worked with or mentored, I'm so filled with gratitude because it's such a great feeling to know that, maybe I was 1%, 2%, 5% of your success you are today. That's just a great feeling to be. And I know that you're going to take those impacts and you're going to continue to give back to all the people that you guys encounter through this podcast or the one-on-one relationships. I just know that you guys are going to continue to give back. And to me, that is just what life is about, is giving back. And how do I make an impact in people and allow them to thrive? So absolutely. Thanks so much for having me, though.
All right. It's been a pleasure. Thank you.
Be sure to check out all the tools and tips for aspiring entrepreneurs at findyourfreedompod.com.